Back then it was 46, now it's 45. But.
It's kind of like my age. But anyway, he's a dear friend. He leads these young people in Texas. And we got to go, Lynette, Dennis and I got to go to the graduation, and I promise you, we felt like grandparents on graduation day. And it was very, very moving. And it was really, really nice. I was very appreciative that we got to go. But we want to give Rick as much time we can to come and talk to us tonight because he's going to light your fire. Rick?
Shake your hand. There we go. All right, that's our official. There we go. Thank you very, very much. You guys have been such good friends to Patriot Academy. Colton and Ryan and Caitlin and all the young people that y'all have sent. I love that shirt, by the way. Thank y'all so much for investing in Patriot Academy, but mostly investing in these students. You are literally going to have a payoff for generations to come in terms of return on your investment because of these young people that you've been willing to help get involved and get them trained. So I want to say thank you by saying Merry Christmas, and I left a bunch of stuff on the table out here, so as you leave tonight for free, I'm not selling anything tonight, I'm giving away stuff to you, so I can say Merry Christmas. So there's a lot of really cool titles out there on the table, but the first thing you have to do is grab a brochure for Patriot Academy and commit to me that you will give it to one young person in your life, 16 to 25 years old, and encourage them to check out the website and potentially be one of your folks that the Montgomery County Tea Party sponsors to come to Patriot Academy next year. And if you do so, then gladly stop by. I got, let's see, 6 different titles on the table for you. So pick 2 of the 6 and take it home with you. You can either read our new book, Legends of Liberty, where we tell 15 really cool stories of great legends and heroes throughout history, or you can get our new television program, Chasing American Legends, which is where we go to all kinds of reenactments like April 19th and other cool places. Or you can get Restoring America's Constitution, which is really kind of our theme tonight, and actually should be our theme every day. Is America One Nation Under God, which is about the faith of our founding fathers. And then a documentary on President Reagan that I did many, many years ago when I had a lot more hair and it wasn't gray. And then the Guardian of Liberty, which is about our free enterprise system. So any one of those, grab them. They're on the table out there. I think I brought plenty for everybody here to get at least 2 of those and take them home so you can study even more. Tonight I'm going to give you kind of a crash course on some of the things we actually teach at Patriot Academy. We start off with the students to say what works, what doesn't work. Hey, baby, how are you? Good. We talk about the things that actually produce good results in a culture and a society, and the things that tear down a society. Because not just with these young people that are coming up right now, but every one of us, we need to know what we are looking for in our public service, in the public policy that we want to support. We need to know what's worked in the past. We don't want to just start from scratch. We want to say what's worked in history. So I think it's very important for us to take the advice of this very funny-looking fellow that I'm about to show you. What happened now? I'm not working anymore. Okay, there he is. All right, very bad tan. I know if you had hair that bad and you were that pale, you should never sit for a portrait. Let's just agree on that right now tonight. But his name is George Mason. He's the father of the Bill of Rights. He's one of our framers. So he's one of the 55 guys that contributed to the Constitution, helped to give us the Constitution. But he actually refused to sign the Constitution. He said not good enough because it didn't have the Bill of Rights. It didn't have those protections of those individual liberties that we hold so dear. But ultimately, he helped to push through the Bill of Rights, became kind of a national advocate for it, and helped to make it happen. But here's what he told us. He said, no free government, nor the blessings of liberty, can be preserved to any people but by a frequent recurrence to fundamental principles. Let's break that down. How many of us want to live in freedom? Anybody out there? Okay, half of you. That's great. All right. How many of you want to enjoy the blessings of liberty? Anybody? Okay. The other half of you, maybe. Okay. So if you want one of those 2 things or both, he says you can't have them unless, as a culture and a society, we have a frequent recurrence to fundamental principles. It means not one time. You know, in our education system, we teach typically the Declaration of the Constitution one time in 5th or 11th grade. If your local school district is following the law that I passed back in 2001, there's a requirement for every classroom in Texas to study the Declaration of the Constitution every single year. A lot of school districts don't do that. You can help to hold them accountable. Say, what are you doing during Celebrate Freedom Week? We've got several other states that have now passed that law. We're trying to get it done across the country. So if you would, go to my website, Rick Green, click on Celebrate Freedom Week, pull up that map, and send to your friends and family across the country. If their state has not yet adopted that law, encourage them to take it to a legislator. Imagine the difference if every kid in America, from 1st through 12th grade, every year, spent time for 1 week on the Declaration and the Constitution, how different would our culture and society be 15, 20 years from now? I promise you, you wouldn't be electing a lot of the socialists that we have in office right now. We would turn that thing around, but it's got to happen through our education system. So, I don't know if my, is it just not responding at all? I may have locked it up. Let's see, I'm on. Oh.
I just switched it to the next slide.
Close. So you really did say it. There you go. Now you get the actual words. But let's have that frequent recurrence tonight. You know what? Let's do this. Will you help me out? And as I do that, will you just hit the down button on the computer?
Yeah, I will.
We'll work in tandem. So
okay.
we'll be a team tonight. So let's go to the Declaration of Independence, though, because that is where we find the foundation. I call it the frame of our freedom. And it's basically what sets up the principles for us to live under. The founders talked about the Declaration as being the slab or the foundation, and then the Constitution being the home. So without the slab, without the foundation, the home falls apart. We've got to have the principles of liberty, who we are, what we believe, what works, what doesn't work, and then we can have the rule book, which is what the Constitution ultimately becomes. But right there in the heart of the Declaration, those precious 56 words that make up that frame. You heard me talk about them before, those of you that have seen my presentations, but this is what we try to ingrain in the students at Patriot Academy. Hopefully, all students across America as we get that legislation passed. But the idea is, first of all, that there are 4 basic principles that make up the frame of America. It's the idea that we hold these truths to be self-evident. There's a right and wrong. There are things that just absolutely are right and things that just absolutely are wrong and will hurt the culture. We have to be willing to stand up and say, that's wrong. That's going to hurt you. It's going to hurt your family. It's going to hurt the community. It's going to hurt the state. You have to be willing to say, hey, that's right. That's a good idea. I'm willing to stand with you for that idea. That's all about that 4th principle, consent of the governed, being willing to get up and say, I give my consent or refuse my consent, which is what you guys are all about and do such a great job at effectively influencing that process. So truths, and then the idea that they come from our rights, come from our Creator. We're endowed by our Creator, not our commissioner, not our state representative, not our governor, no justices on any Supreme Court. Our freedom and our rights come from God, and then we give certain power to government through that consent of the governed to set up a system that will protect those rights. So think about truths, think about the fact that it comes from our Creator, think about the fact that all of that has to be protected by the idea of consent of the governed, and in the pursuit of happiness, that free enterprise system that made our nation so successful. Our founders often connected free enterprise and the free market to all of our other liberties. Benjamin Franklin talked about that it was through the free market that we would hand down freedom to our posterity. That if we didn't protect free enterprise and the free market and keep the government out of that, we would begin to lose all of our other freedoms because government would forget its proper jurisdictions, those constitutional boundaries that we the people gave them. So once they start meddling in the market, then all of a sudden later they start meddling in everything else like we're seeing now in terms of our freedom of religion and all the other things that we care so much about. So tonight I want to talk about the timeless principles of liberty, and the way we're going to do it is I'm going to put you in the Hunger Games. Okay, y'all ready for the Hunger Games, right? All right. And those of you who don't know what the Hunger Games are, it's a post-apocalyptic world. So maybe let's try this one. Anybody watch Lost? Let's see. Give me another. Yeah. Anybody read Lord of the Flies? All right. So now I'm getting you. Okay. So we got this fascination in America today with the zombie apocalypse and the post-apocalyptic world and all those things. That's why I went out and bought 20 AR-15s and all the other things. We got our zombie rounds and we're all ready for it. But what if it actually happened? All right, if it actually happened and we projected ourselves past the zombie apocalypse to the point that all the zombies are dead and all that's left is us right here in this room, and we got to start over. We got to actually create a government and a society. We've got to design how our world is going to work. What would be important to us? If you were redesigning from scratch our government, if you were designing from scratch what society was going to look like, what would be important to you? What would you want to make sure was in the political and economic structures of that society so that you could live in freedom or whatever was important to you? I'm serious. So help me out. Tell me what you would look for in that design of that government or the rules by which we're going to have a compact in our society right here. We've got to create some kind of system in order to live amongst each other. Now, what would be important to you? What would you like to see? Yes, sir?
One nation under God.
Okay, so you want God in the equation then. You want to make sure that our culture is acknowledging an almighty creator. I like it. All right, good man. So this man has read the founding fathers. Give me that next slide here. So we're designing it from scratch. We're going to make sure that we can acknowledge God, not just can acknowledge God, Our founding fathers would say we must acknowledge God. That you cannot have a free society that doesn't acknowledge God. You can go to Washington, you can go to Adams, you can go to even Jefferson, believe it or not, and these guys often talked about the fact that you had to do this publicly, not just privately. You know, today it's all about, we're going to protect your freedom of worship. Have you ever noticed President Obama no longer says freedom of religion? He says freedom of worship. You know what the difference is? Think about that. Freedom of worship means, okay, we're going to let you still worship in your church and in your home, but don't you take that into the marketplace. Don't take it to business. It's fine on Sunday, but don't show up on Monday morning and say you're going to live by your religion. Freedom of religion means that you live by these principles, that you act on these principles in the way you treat your employees or your employers, your family, the people in your community, your neighbors. Freedom of religion is very different from, or is much more than just freedom of worship. So that whole idea of acknowledging God was very important to the founding fathers of America. It certainly should be to those of us that are left after the zombie apocalypse. It's just an analogy that the students at Patriot Academy like. So y'all just play along with me tonight. Okay? All right. So what other freedoms would you want to guarantee if we were starting from scratch? Yes, sir. Back here.
The right to bear arms.
I like that one too. Absolutely.
Lots of arms.
But why? Why do you want to be able to carry a gun? I mean, we're nice people in here. Nobody here's going to. Well, why is that so important to you?
Well, because we need to be in position to defend ourselves, to defend our freedom. And if the government should turn the wrong way, we'll have our arms to protect us.
I'm so glad you mentioned that second part. See, we so often think of the Second Amendment as just a right to hunt. It has nothing to do with pheasants, folks. It has everything to do with freedom. It has everything to do with being able to protect ourselves against an aggressor. That's why James Wilson, he was one that talked about the castle doctrine and the whole fact that every man's house is his castle, and if he's robbed in it, it is his own default and negligence. Right. You can't have a policeman in every home. So he said the American people are blessed to be able to protect themselves, and they ought to do it. Not just can do it, they ought to do it so that they are protecting themselves and their family. But then the second point that you make, so many founders, John Witherspoon and so many others, talked about what was unique in the American world that we have is that we are able to keep a potentially tyrannical government at bay because of that right to keep and bear arms. It is not just to stop the mugger, it's to stop government from mugging us as well. It's absolutely about keeping them at bay. So important. I'm so glad you mentioned that. Yes, sir. And then I'll get you up.
Yes, for freedoms. It'd be also for the NSA is not going over our cell phone records.
Having your cell phone without the so how would we define that in terms of if we're going to gather together and create a right to privacy and what? Search and seizure. So our due process, all those things.
Big brother. Big brother.
The right to private property and assets.
Excellent,
Absolutely.
excellent. So tell me what that means. Tell to you what is a right to privacy
and not yours.
Okay, so if we're the last ones left, or let's say we're Jack and Kate and all the folks from the TV show Lost, and we land on that island, right? And we're the only ones on that island, and you figure out what your piece of that island is going to be. Part of our government structure is going to be to say, hey, I don't have a right to come take your, apples and oranges or whatever's on your, I guess it's an island, maybe they only have pineapples. I don't know, whatever is on the island, I don't have a right to come take what is yours. That would be theft. I mean, we got 20% of the 10 Commandments is about protecting private property. So much of our law is about being able to protect your private property, not just your property in terms of the land that you own, but your intellectual property, your thoughts even, your beliefs. That's part of your personal property that we got to protect. Excellent. Let's see. Who else? Yes, sir.
Right to life.
Right to life. What does that mean to you?
Right to life.
Put you on the spot,
Where do
didn't
we
it?
start?
Yeah.
And protecting the unborn, protecting the family, protecting everything that we stand for.
Excellent. All of the above, because none of this other stuff that they're talking about matters if you don't have the right to life, right? I mean, what good is liberty? What good is the pursuit of happiness? What good are all those things if we don't first have that life? So in our society, we're going to respect life. We don't have the right to take each other's life. Yeah.
You can put it in as saying that the right begins at conception, you mentioned,
Right.
and that would be protected.
And I would say all the way to natural death.
Yeah.
Right? So excellent. Okay, who else? Let's do a couple more, then we'll jump on Colton.
Freedom of speech.
Freedom of speech, and what does that mean to you?
I can say whatever I want to the degree, even if it disagrees with me overarching.
What if I'm offended by that? What if you hurt my feelings?
You have a right.
I like that gender. So we're not going to create a right to not be offended. It doesn't say life, liberty, and to never be offended in the Declaration of Independence, right? So the freedom of speech, even if someone else is offended, in fact, that might be the most important speech to protect, right? I mean, and look at what happens. We're beginning to see this whole idea of political correctness has been mostly theory for the last 30 or 40 years. We talk about it and we implement all these things, and really other than on college campuses, we haven't seen the negative effect. Well, this weekend we saw it, right? The guy that knew, he was totally suspicious of these terrorists, but because of political correctness, because of the chilling effect of us stamping out people that might say something that's offensive, he was afraid to speak up, and 14 people are dead today that would be alive if he had not been stamped out by that political correctness. Excellent, excellent. Yes, sir?
I don't know that I can improve upon the current writings, X the 16th and 17th Amendment.
Yeah, me too.
Ecstasy, you could get rid of them, right?
Get rid of
If we were doing my full Constitution class, we'd get to those, and I'd say the 17th is the second. When I get to that one, I always say that's the second worst amendment in the Constitution, and we should go back to allowing our legislators to elect our U.S. senators because it keeps the federal government in check. We've lost that check and balance, and you can see that hockey stick curve growth of the federal government from the time that we did that. And it was a terrible mistake, but then everybody else said, well, what's the first worst? Of course, the first worst is the 16th Amendment. So, yes, I'm all for that. So, but fortunately, we're starting on our island, and we're starting from scratch, so we just won't ever put them in there in the first place. Yes, sir?
Due process.
Due process. So just like we were talking about over here, making sure, and this applies to so many things. What if he accuses me of stealing those apples, oranges, pineapples, or whatever it is? We want to have some sort of process in place rather than you guys just lynching me because he claimed that happened. That's a whole lot of things that we want to make sure are in place in order to protect those liberties as well. Yes, sir? Okay, so this opens up a whole other thing. How are we going to set up our government? In other words, what will be we can't all make every decision, right? So we're not going to all, we got to create some kind of council or Congress or some sort of elected body. It sounds like you said right to vote, so I'm just going to jump on that and say we want to have an elected body, not one that's just appointed or just the strongest or the law of the tiger and the shark. We want to make sure that it's someone that we all choose. And so actually, let me get you to jump forward here to the structures that we put in place. Actually, that's an important question. As we do this, as we design our system,
What?
I mentioned it earlier already that we don't want to just start from scratch, we want to learn from history. You ever, as you read the Founding Fathers, you begin to study how they came up with our system, you ever notice how learned they were? I mean, how much they had been students of every society that had ever existed to try to figure out what works, what doesn't work. It was one of the reasons they were so brilliant. I mean, I believe inspired in many ways in what they did, but I think they were just brilliant students of history, so they could point to somebody come up with an idea of let's put this in there, and they could say, wait a minute, don't you remember when that happened, 2,000 years ago this, or that society did that? So learning from history, I think, is so important. I think it's why we're making a lot of the mistakes we're making right now in our country is we're ignoring history. We don't, frankly, know history anymore. So because we don't remember the mistakes of the past, the old adage, right? We're doomed to repeat it, and we're beginning to repeat it. So absolutely, I think we want to learn from scratch. Let's get that next one. I can't remember. Oh, yeah. So all these things that we're talking about so far, and even the elected part, our founders did the same process that we're doing right now, and came up with a system that through our Declaration and our Constitution became the most successful and most free in the history of mankind. So they were very thoughtful about every one of these freedoms that you're talking about, and obviously a lot more. We don't have time in our limited time tonight to go through each of them, but fortunately for us, we don't have to start from scratch, you know? I mean, even if we could say today that we were going to have a successful revolution and we were going to throw the bums out and start over, we wouldn't have to start over. We are blessed to have a great foundation and fortunately to have a peaceable means and all the tools at our fingertips to save our republic. We can turn this thing around. We got some terrible things happening in our country right now, awful things happening. But in every instance, there's nothing wrong with our country that the right leadership cannot turn around. In fact, there's not many complaints in our culture right now that you couldn't go back to 1979 in a time machine and say the same things are happening. Whether it's radical Islamic terrorism or it's horrible economic and socialist policies. I mean, you pick it. A lot of the bad things we're dealing with now, we dealt with in 1979. And many of those things were turned around through Ronald Reagan, not just Reagan, but the Reagan Revolution and a lot of the folks that came in with him. So the right leadership can turn those things around. Be hopeful and understand that the system still works. We just got to work the system. And I understand, I see faces out here that we've been fighting, together. We've been working and locking shields and trying to turn this thing around for a decade or more at this point. And you might be feeling like, it's not working. We're not getting anywhere. you got to realize these things don't happen overnight. This is a generational fight. It will take that long. I really think Colton and a lot of the young people that have come through Patriot Academy, they're going to get the benefit of a lot of our work. We may not even be around to see it, right? I mean, we may not serve, it may be 40 years before some of these things that need to be turned around actually happen. But we're doing that for our kids and our grandkids. It can happen. I believe it can happen faster if you guys continue to be great evangelists for freedom and grow your organizations and begin to see the hard work that you put in over the last 6, 7, 8, 10 years begin to pay off. Yes, sir, I'm sorry, you had your hand up.
No, quick question to your throw the bombs out statement. Do you think that's why, if we already have a blueprint for how to form a government or how to proceed from scratch, do you think that's why some people in this nation want to forget history prior to 1865? A few years ago, there was a push in by some schools and school administrators to start history at 1865 because they said that prior to that, history was irrelevant, that children were having to learn way too much already.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with some of that. I think there's definitely an attitude of what happened before then is really just not that important, and out of ignorance, not realizing how important it is to teach those principles. So yeah, I think there's definitely some of that. I think it's almost an arrogance on our part as a culture to think we've arrived. We don't, there's nothing we can learn from those old guys, and that hurts us as well. It's kind of that new age mentality of we can recreate everything so much better than they did, which actually is not new under the sun. That happens throughout history as well. So yeah, I think I agree with some of that. I think it's unfortunate, but you're right. I mean, we fight those battles at the State Board of Education all the time in terms of what's going to be in the textbooks. Who's going to be emphasized. We have so little covered on the Founding Fathers and the founding principles now because we're so caught up in a lot of this new stuff that, there are those that think that's more important. I don't. I think as a nation we should honor those who put it in place despite their faults and things that they did wrong. I think you have to emphasize the contributions of great men and women throughout our history, that their contributions ultimately are why we're able to even be here tonight. So. Yeah, and it's hard. I also get that you only have so much time in a year, in a school year, and all those things. And there is so much to teach. But you go look at the Texas Constitution, and in the section on our education system, the very first thing that it says is something to the effect of a general diffusion of knowledge. I'm not going to be able to quote it exactly, but it basically says if you want good citizens, it talks about having good citizens and an informed citizenry, which is necessary for electing good representatives and having an elected system of government. Then you got to have a good education system that teaches those things. It's the whole purpose of education. It's supposed to be to raise up good citizens that understand what works and what doesn't work, because you can't make good decisions in who you elect if you don't know what the plumb line is. In other words, it's not enough for a guy to have a good sounding name or give a good speech. We want to know, what is that person going to do in office, and are those principles, do they line up with the plumb line, the good principles, so that we can have a good society. And if we're not teaching what makes a good society, then we lose in the end. And that's where we are. I mean, there's no doubt we have a populace that doesn't know these basics. 74% of Americans can't even tell you things like the 3 branches of government. It's very basic ideas. 72% of elected officials can't tell you a lot of those basic things. That's why I like what the Joe Foss Institute's doing with the citizenship exam. You see that where Arizona passed that? You have to pass the basic citizenship exam to get your high school diploma. Now that's the floor, right? I mean, that's the minimum you ought to know. But I'm all for at least making that the floor. Right now, they don't even have to necessarily know that much. So, those minimum standards are absolutely necessary. Okay, let's jump in here. Let's just keep going for me. Okay, so this is what we try to base these things on when we teach at Patriot Academy, is not teaching things that are just popular at the time or something that feels good and might work, but make sure that it's a timeless principle of liberty. Let's spend our energy on those things that will last forever, right? So timeless means lasting forever, not restricted to a particular date or time, not affected by time. So in other words, you could take these principles that we're going to talk about and what we teach the students, and you could put them in any time in history, and the principles will still produce the result. It's like Congressman Bob McEwen always says. He says the only problem with these principles is they only work every time they're tried, right? So the principles will work even if, and it takes time sometimes, because if you actually implement those principles, even in a nation like ours right now, where the average citizen doesn't understand these things, it will take time to implement them. Think about the children of Israel. I mean, when they came out of Egypt, They had been in captivity. For 400 years they had been slaves, not educated, didn't know how to live in freedom. They were used to being told every day what they were going to do. They didn't know how to have a society that would work. And what did God do? He gave them the 10 Commandments, and He said, if you live by these timeless principles of liberty right here, you'll be able to have a society where you won't be killing each other every day. You'll be able to live. And that's why I always tell people the 10 Commandments are not God's restrictions. This is His instruction manual. He knows how our brain works, how our body works, how our relationships work. So all He was doing was saying, hey guys, here, I'm gonna give you a cheat sheet. If you'll live by these basic ideas, these timeless principles of liberty, you're going to be able to live in freedom and have. What the Benham brothers say the other night, they had a great presentation Thursday night at the Texas Values Dinner. It was, I love the phrase, it was something to the effect of God's greatest blessings are only found within God's boundaries. And what they mean by that is, he said, here's the instruction book. If you live by the instruction book, you get great benefits, man. I mean, it's going to be phenomenal. You go outside the boundaries and outside the instruction book, there's a lot of pain out there. So let me try to save you from that pain. That was not what I was going to talk about tonight. I got off on a tangent again. Okay, so the principles, that's the cause, source, or origin of anything. That from which a thing proceeds. Go ahead, keep going there. Oh, my button responder. Okay, ground foundation, that which supports an assertion. I don't want to get too far in the weeds. Keep going. Let's see. I'm going too slow here. All right. Okay, so liberty. So what do we mean by liberty? Because we might have different ideas of that. Let's go back to 1828 Webster's Dictionary. Liberty is freedom from restraint in a general sense, and applicable to the body, the will, the mind. The body is at liberty but not confined. The will or mind is at liberty but not checked or controlled. A man enjoys liberty when no physical force operates or restrains his actions or volitions. Go ahead, next slide. Natural liberty consists of the power of acting as one thinks fit without any restraint or control except for the laws of nature. So, if you were in the TV show Lost and you were the only one to survive the plane crash and you're the only one on the island, then natural liberty means you can do anything and everything you want, except the laws of nature are going to get in the way sometimes. So if there's a bear or there's something more powerful than you, they're going to be able to limit your liberty. So a natural state of liberty is only inhibiting your liberty by the laws of nature. It's a state of exemption from the control of others, so you wouldn't be living in a society. That liberty is abridged by the establishment of government. That doesn't mean government's bad. It just means if we're going to live together in a society, we're going to have to create a government, and there's going to be some things that from that government and respect for other people that are going to limit our quote-unquote natural liberty. Okay, next one. Civil liberty, so that's what we have when we live amongst each other, is the liberty of men in a state of society or natural liberty. But here's the important part. So far only abridged or restrained as is necessary and expedient for the safety and interest of the society, state, or nation. And that's where that elected body comes in to make those decisions about, okay, what is absolutely necessary and expedient for the safety and interest of the society, state, or nation. Tyranny would be when we go beyond what is absolutely necessary. So we start actually inhibiting your liberty when it's not necessary to do so for the safety and the interest of the society, state, or nation. Okay, so restraining natural liberty not necessary is tyranny or oppression. Let's go to the next slide. I'm going to speed up here because I went too long in the opening. So 4 things I want, this is what we teach at Patriot Academy, the LIFT principle. So limited government first of all. I know we're all freedom lovers here, we're all, we want limited government, but what does limited government mean? See, to the founders, that did not mean how much money was spent by government. Yes, there's a restraint you want on that, you want it to be used for rationally and all those things. It's not how much they spend, it's what they spend it on. So, in other words, our federal government is within its limited boundaries that we gave it, even if it spends $1 trillion on national defense. I mean, you're going to have to spend a whole lot, billions of dollars, in order to defend 330, 40 million people in a nation. But when they spend even $1 outside the boundaries of what we, the people, defined for them they could do, that's not limited government. So even spending a small amount of money on something that we didn't give them the authority, a word we don't use very often. See, when I talk jurisdictions, restrictions, boundaries, authority, we don't talk about that anymore. We tend to think in terms of we've got a problem, we need government to solve, and we go to government, we want them to solve it. Instead of saying, does government have the authority to do this? If I'm going to my congressman, does the federal government have the authority to do this? Does my state government, does my local government, do they have the authority to do it? We don't ask that question. And if we're going to return, if we're going to restore our constitutional republic, then we've got to think like a constitutional republic, which means there are boundaries to every branch and every level of government. There's some defined authority for them. So limited government has to do with those jurisdictions. What can they actually do? and then we have to decide what those things are going to be. Go ahead and skip up here. Let's go to not defined by money. Okay, so this is kind of, government stays in, one more time, government stays in its boundaries. Government's a good thing, but when government gets outside those boundaries, that's when it begins to take away our liberty. So how do we decide what to let government do? Let's talk about what Jefferson said, limited government would be. 5 quick things out of his first inaugural address. Boy, I have to go slower whenever I can't get my clicker to work. Okay.
Tell me when to stop.
Okay. It is the duty of all nations. Remember I mentioned earlier how they said it's not just a right to acknowledge God, we have to do it. He said it's the duty of all nations to acknowledge the providence of Almighty God, to obey His will, to be grateful for His benefits, and humbly to implore His protection and favor. Go ahead. So that's the model that they created for us. We got it from God, and then we loan certain powers to government, and our job is to keep them in check. And we do it so they can protect us. So from God to we the people, then to government. That formula paid off in spades. I mean, we enjoyed great liberty and freedom and prosperity in our nation. And then about 50 years ago, we started saying, we like this. We like controlling our government, but we don't like having God at the top of this thing because that kind of limits my freedom. If there's a God in this thing, that means there's some things I can't do and I can do, and somebody else is telling me what to do. So I want pure, unadulterated liberty without anybody telling me what to do. Therefore, I don't want God in this equation. So we started erasing God from our formula. And we thought, hey, no problem, because even without God in the equation, we still control government. It's still up to us. It's that French Enlightenment kind of thinking. And we didn't realize, wait a minute, if you change the formula, you get a different result. See, the original formula worked great. We got a great result. If you change the formula, you get God out of the equation, guess what happens? We don't continue to control our government. Government starts controlling us, right? And that's what's happened. It's flipped the formula. So you got to acknowledge and adore God and keep God in that equation. You got to exercise frugality, not spending our children's inheritance. He said, I place economy among the first and most important of republican virtues, and public debt as the greatest of dangers to be feared. To preserve the independence of the people, we must not let our rulers load us with perpetual debt. Boy, we kind of messed that one up, didn't we? So here we are, we made perpetual debt. We must make our choice between frugality and liberty, or excessive spending and servitude. So people want all these programs. They're literally choosing between liberty or servitude. So you can have excessive debt, spend all kinds of money, and get the servitude that comes with that, or you can have frugality and get the liberty. If the debt should be swelled to a formidable size, its entire discharge will be despaired of, and we should be committed to a career of debt, corruption, and rottenness. That's where we are. Right? I mean, we know that. That's why you're here. That's why you're part of this organization. That's why you do what you do. Because we know we are facing debt, corruption, and rottenness. The discharge of the debt, therefore, is vital to the destinies of our government. So if we want limited government, we've got to discharge the debt and not spend beyond our means. Third thing, restrain the infliction of injury. So on our island or wherever you're going to create that government, part of government's role is to keep us from killing each other, keep us from hurting each other. That's the proper function of our government. Fourth, encourage entrepreneurship and free enterprise. Man, we can spend all night on that one. Get that DVD out there, The Guardian of Liberty. That's what it's all about. It's basically a million quotes from Milton Friedman. So anyway, it's all about the fact that we need that free enterprise and get government out of the marketplace. Yes, sir.
Last year was the first year in the history of our nation that more businesses closed than open.
Yeah, that's the result of changing the formula, right? I mean, oh, no, I can't get on my